Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Class E podcast. I'm your host, Mary Sturgill. This podcast is brought to you through a partnership between the Hill Institute for Innovation and Entrepreneurship and the Communication Studies Department here at Furman University. Today, we welcome a very special guest, Todd Malo, who is the managing partner for Mavin Construction. Welcome, Todd.
Thank you. Appreciate being here, Mary.
I'm so glad we finally got you on. I've been wanting to get you on for a while because you have been integral in many things here that are going on, especially with the Hill Institute. But before we start talking about that, I want to back up a little bit and talk about your time at Furman.
Okay.
You graduated in '95 with a geology degree,
Yes.
which most people would think, well, what does that have to do with anything that you're doing now?
Well, a lot actually.
Yeah.
I mean, foundations go in the dirt, and dirt supports the building, and so knowing what type of soils and if I had any professors from geology listening and they heard me call it dirt, they would be sorely disappointed because it's soil.
Yes.
But yeah, no, so a lot to do with it.
How did Furman prepare you, other than knowing the soil? I'll use the right term for the professors, just in case they're listening. What else about Furman helped prepare you for what you do now?
So in general, I think, construction, you're basically just solving problems on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. There's every day there's something new that you're faced with, and some curveball that you're thrown, and so you're just constantly solving problems. And Furman certainly teaches you how to think outside the box and solve problems.
A lot of professors will be happy to hear that as well. Those critical thinking skills are so important. When you were here at Furman, were there any defining moments for you that maybe made you think, I'm going to be an entrepreneur someday?
No, definitely not. And I kind of don't even think of myself as an entrepreneur. In my mind, an entrepreneur is someone who creates a new product or a new service, and it's maybe not been done before. And in my case, I mean, we've been building buildings for many centuries, and so in a large part, I think I feel like I'm definitely a business owner, but maybe not an entrepreneur in the truest sense.
Mm-hmm. I don't think you're alone in that. And a lot of business owners don't believe themselves to be entrepreneurs. They believe themselves to be small business owners. But even though you're a small business owner, you're still doing some innovative things, are you not?
We try to.
Yeah,
we try to. I mean, construction's definitely evolving, and there's new technologies and new methodologies for constructing, and so we try to stay on the cutting edge, and not the bleeding edge, but definitely the leading edge.
I like that. The leading edge, not the bleeding edge. That's a good motto to live by. So you worked for many years for someone else.
That's right.
When did you decide, okay, I'm going to go do this on my own and start my own company?
Well, it was a little bit of a forced entry into my own business. So I'll back up and give you my history. I graduated from Furman and went to work for a home builder right out of school, slinging a hammer and framing houses, and loved it. I mean, it was something that at the end of every day I could tangibly see what I had done, and there was a tremendous sense of accomplishment, and it was very rewarding. And so I knew I was in the right space. I knew I wanted to be in construction, but I knew that I was sort of in a dead-end role where I was. I mean, I had really achieved the maximum potential there, and so it was time to move on. And so I moved into the commercial space, get exposed to a little bit more professional environment. I landed at a firm that I was at for 17 years, and the two equity partners, when we hit the 2008, 2010 downturn, fundamentally disagreed on sort of how to handle that downturn. And so to sort of reconcile their irreconcilable differences, they decided to wind the business down over about a year period, finishing up all of our contracts in a very responsible way. And I was in a leadership position there, and I was asked to stay on to help wind them down. And so I had about a year of runway where I could really start to really evaluate what my next steps were. And so I approached a colleague at that firm, and he and I partnered, started Mavin, and then slowly kind of started ramping Mavin up as we were ramping the other business down, and taking a lot of the folks that we had worked with for a long time and moved them with us. So even though Mavin's a 10-year-old business, a lot of us have worked together for a lot longer than that.
So you weren't totally starting from scratch. You almost had your clientele base kind of there already.
That's right. We had the wind at our back because we started in 2012, which is when things really started to kind of pick back up. And then we had a lot of clients that really wanted to see us do well and gave us a lot of opportunities. And so we really did have the wind at our back, which was great.
It's all about the timing, isn't it?
Yeah, timing's everything.
Timing is everything. On your website, you are called the Sage. Why is that?
Well, my partner and I each have very different strengths. The other way that we sometimes refer to ourselves, kind of tongue-in-cheek, is he's the throttle and I'm the brake.
I like that.
But that didn't sound as good in the market
Right.
from a marketing perspective,
Correct,
and so I think he's the innovator. He's the guy that's always kind of pushing the envelope. I consider him kind of more the true entrepreneur of us. And I'm more the operational guy, the guy that's more engineering minded, the one that's more systematic, and I create a little more order to sometimes the chaos that he sometimes brings. And so I guess Sage was what we sort of deemed my value add to the business.
So what wise advice do you give your colleagues and your coworkers and the people who work for you?
First of all, I'm the older one of us, and so I think I tend to be a little more grounded in reality sometimes, and so I think reality and Sage sort of go hand in hand. But without DJ, my partner, we certainly would not do some of the cool things that we do, and so I'm grateful for his participation and partnership.
Yeah. So how did you come up with the name Mavin?
So we were starting Mavin, and we didn't have a name, and we reached out to Ross McLean, who is the head of the art department here. DJ, my partner, actually, surprisingly enough, had a relationship with him, and DJ's a USC Gamecock graduate, and so me being the Furman guy, you would think I would have had the relationship with Ross, but no, DJ did, and sat down, went through a brainstorming exercise with Ross, and we were kind of bouncing around on some key concepts, but it was very cliche, some of the names we were coming up with. And Maestro was one of the names that we kind of hit on, which if you think about someone who conducts an orchestra, right, there's all these disparate instruments, and they've all got to kind of come together and do their part at the right time in the right way, and that's much like construction.
Absolutely.
We liked the concept, but the name Maestro Construction just didn't quite roll off the tongue, or didn't seem really relevant. And so Mavin was a synonym for Maestro, and we really liked that name because neither of us had ever used it in our contemporary language. It wasn't a name that we used a lot, and we knew that it would create conversation. People would ask us about it, like, what is Mavin? Where did it come from? And it does. Every time someone asks about it, and it means an expert. It means someone who's good at what they do. They pass on knowledge, they share knowledge, and that's certainly what we try to do with our clients is lead them through a process and pass on knowledge.
I know in your experiences, especially from the beginning of your company and bringing some of those clients with you, that there have been instances where you're like, this is a total learning experience as an entrepreneur. Can you share some of those with us?
I would say that the biggest challenge we face as an entrepreneur is oftentimes your vision or where your excitement, where your passion is sometimes several years ahead of where your reality and current staffing levels and resources sometimes allow you to be. And so sometimes it's tempering some of the excitement and some of the dreams that you have for the business have to be kind of reeled back in, and it's really a lot like building a building, right? So you could be really excited about some windows that you want to put in the building, but you got to get the grading done first, you got to get the foundation done first, you've got to get your framing done first, and then there'll be a time and a place for the windows, but you can't go installing the windows when it's the time to do the foundation. And so I think there's a lot of times where we get excited about the possibilities and what could be, but we have to kind of reel ourselves back in sometimes.
I was going to say, I imagine that's reoccurring, and that's just kind of goes along with what you do, right? So, do you have an entrepreneurial philosophy?
I mean, we're very open door policy. People bring us ideas all the time, and we really try hard not to shut stuff down. We try to say yes to everything. So I think from that standpoint, our culture is very embraces that. But in terms of just kind of from an operational perspective, we don't have anything that's engineered into our day-to-day operation that necessarily fosters that.
And it varies by project.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Absolutely.
I get that. Yeah, for sure. I took a year off from working, and I was a construction project coordinator for Habitat for Humanity.
Nice.
Way back when I was much younger. And I loved it. And I love your analogy that you just drew over, you have to have the foundation first, and you have to do the framing first before you can do certain things. And I think that actually is a good philosophy in and of itself for every entrepreneur, to build the foundation first.
To grow a business and to be scalable, you do have to have a solid foundation, because if you're if you've got a shoddy foundation and then you try to scale on top of that, it'll tell on itself quickly.
Speaking of scaling, how are you planning on scaling? How do you grow bigger?
Yeah, so we've struggled with that, because we love what we have. We have a really great culture. We've got people that have been with us since the beginning. Really virtually no turnover. And so anytime you have that close-knit, almost family-type environment, to think about growing, you think about the bureaucracy that starts to creep in, and you think about how that could wreck sort of what you have, and so it's kind of like to grow or not to grow. And I think we've always sort of wrestled with that, and we've always said, we'll do a great job, and the great job will lead to the next job, right. And then our clients will sort of naturally force us to grow, and it'll force us in an organic way and not in a contrived way where you just sort of arbitrarily set a sales goal or something and you're just going to hit it, come hell or high water. We've never been like that. We've always tried to do everything very organic. But we've also come to realize here of late that, we've got some guys that are in their early 60s, and their timetable for retirement is nearing, and so we've got young folks that we've brought in, and we realized to give them a career path and give them the opportunity to grow, we really have to grow as a business, or else we are going to, the old adage or the old saying is, if you're not growing, you're dying.
Right.
And so I think there's some truth to that, and I think we've come to realize that over time. And so I think we're embracing growth right now, and I think we plan on growing through specialization. So we live in a very specialized world, and being kind of a generalist it can be difficult at times to compete with people that are 10, 100, 1,000 times bigger than you. The way that you compete is to be specialized. And
doctors do that, so why not everybody else, right?
Right.
You have a couple of Furman projects that you've done and are doing currently, which I think are pretty cool. Let's talk about the Davies Idea Exchange. You did that one really quick.
Yeah, it was good coordination, good teamwork, and we were able to get ahead by ordering some things early, and that in this environment right now with the material supply chains being so erratic, it's really becomes a key driver to the success of a project. So yeah, it was a cool project, very innovative, and
for sure.
We were certainly proud to be part of it.
Yeah. So listeners, if you are in the Greenville area, I invite you to come stop by the Davies Idea Exchange in Hip Hall here on Furman University campus, because it's just a beautiful space. It really is. The other thing that you're working on right now is the new space. Tell us about that.
The 101 North Main space, yeah. So we just wrapped that up. Just recently, I guess it was this past Friday, we had an opportunity to use the space ourselves. We had our company quarterly meeting in the space. It was great. We loved it.
Very cool.
Very cool. It felt very hip and relevant to be downtown and having people walk past us as we were sitting there having a quarterly meeting. Great asset, I think, for Furman, and Furman will benefit from its
Yeah, if you're downtown Greenville at 101 Main, down the way, you can't miss the signs in the windows, the Furman signs, down the way from Methodical Coffee, right?
Yep, it's right next door, and
Yeah.
the same plaza that Tupelo Honey and some of the other restaurants there.
So go see that space. And then, do we have a project on Poinsett?
Yeah, so we are involved with the Hartness project that is going to be it was the old Pepsi bottling plant.
I was wondering what that was.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is going to be revitalized and turned into a multi-tenant office suite that really all the tenants that are within the suite or within the building will be aimed at some way they'll support the ecosystem of innovation and entrepreneurship. So I know there'll be, and I probably shouldn't say any of the tenants because they may not be nailed down, and so I'll refrain from
I believe we're full for the first phase. I'll say that much.
Yeah.
I believe we're full for the first phase, probably looking at tenants for the second phase. But this is the Furman Innovation District. Yeah, on Point, and it's located on Poinsett. And if you know where the old Pepsi warehouse is, it's that big, long gray building, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So
About halfway between Cherrydale and downtown.
exactly. So we're really spreading our footprint, and you're helping us do that.
Yeah, well,
right.
we are honored to do so,
Yeah.
and really appreciate the opportunity.
And of course, taking on some of these projects and turning them around really quickly, despite the supply chain kind of chaos.
It's definitely a challenge right now.
Yeah.
It's we have to work a lot harder and think a lot further ahead, and think of all the things that could possibly go wrong to try to stay ahead of it and try to keep projects out of trouble.
Speaking of the supply chain and the trouble that COVID has caused, how did it affect you in any other ways other than the supply chain as a company?
It has been a definite struggle. We've early on, when people were choosing to work virtually, 30% of our staff is office, and then 70% is field staff. And so the office staff didn't feel right sitting at home on the couch in our pajamas,
While everybody else was at work.
zooming in while everybody else, didn't have that luxury. They had to physically go to the job site. And so we made a decision that we would keep the office open, really more from a morale standpoint than anything. But we did rotate folks in and out, so we didn't keep a full office. We kept just about half staff, and just we had kind of a rotational schedule.
Almost like the schools did, with some students are here this day and some students are here this day.
That was we got through that pretty easily. The thing here of late that's challenged us is the federal government. We do a lot of healthcare work, and we have we're in Prisma's and ANMED's facilities all the time doing work, and we'll have 2 to 3 projects kind of going at any one time with them. The federal government mandated that any healthcare providers needed to be fully vaccinated, and healthcare worker vendors that work inside the hospital system that extends to them as well.
Right.
And 70% of our employees are vaccinated, but there's 30% that's not.
Right.
And we chose not to mandate it within our company because there was really nobody in the construction space that was mandating it. And if we went out there and mandated it, it's a great market to be hired away right now. And so we felt like we were at risk of losing some folks. And so we chose very intentionally not to mandate it.
So that added another layer of having to maneuver around those regulations with the medical facilities, I'm sure.
Right. It was kind of a big hubbub there for a minute. We had to kind of try to figure that out and keep people from overreacting and kind of taking things a little too far. And we've successfully done that, and we're back into a good space now. But it was a kerfluffle for a minute.
Right. I think it was for everybody. So you're not alone in that one. When you started your business, or even throughout, having it, has anyone ever given you some really bad advice?
No, not that I can think of. The best advice I received.
That was my next question, so we'll slide right on into that one.
When I was trying to make a decision, go, no go, with starting Mavin, I had two different people give me 2 separate pieces of advice. And knowing myself, I'm pretty cautious. I'm not a traditional throw all caution.
You're the sage.
Yes. It was a big decision for me, and one person told me that, if you wait for all the lights to be green down Main Street, let's say you're sitting in a car and you have to wait for everything to be green before you decide to go, then you'll never go. I mean, you'll never leave. At some point, you just have to let that first light turn green and just start to put one foot in front of the other and go. And that was incredibly valuable for me at that time in my life. And then the second piece of advice I got was from a client, actually, that I had done a lot of work with over the years. He said, if you can paint out the worst case scenario of what if everything went absolutely wrong, could you live with it? Like, could you put the pieces back together and be fine? Right. And when I did that, it was very liberating because it was like, yeah, I can absolutely live with this. I'll be fine. And so in that moment, it was kind of like, at that point, I was all in. And then there was nothing holding me back at that point. It was just full steam ahead. Whereas before, there was just this constant trepidation and kind of, one day I felt like, yeah, I'll do it. And the next day I was like, no, I don't think so.
Right. That's really good advice. That's really good advice. So imagine the worst case scenario, and if you can survive that, then go for it.
That's right.
Which most of us imagine the worst case scenario all the time anyway, because it's human nature. And the other piece of advice that I think that I really liked was all the green lights are not going to be green at the same time. So go when you can and hit the next one and go again, right? I love those. So some really good advice, podcast listeners. What advice do you have for young entrepreneurs who are just starting out?
I would say just do things that build confidence early, because I think I don't know that I was a terribly confident person, and I still may not be, but I think with confidence you feel, you really truly believe you can do anything, and so I think the more things you can do and put yourself out there early and just put yourself in uncomfortable situations that stretch yourself, and when you realize that life keeps going and that you've lived through it and you've overcome it, the next thing that you face is not as insurmountable as the last one, and you just kind of keep knocking those things down in your life, and the confidence just gradually grows and grows and grows. And so I think as a youngster, I don't think I put myself out there very much. I played everything very, very safe. And I love to see young kids just doing stuff that's just challenging, and there's just kind of this no fear. And I think I always had a little bit of fear, and that held me back. And I think everybody kind of blooms in their own time. And so, I'll consider myself a late bloomer.
I like that, though, that, you put yourself out there. And I think every time you do put yourself out there, you get another little tool for your toolbox, right? Speaking in construction terms here. Pun intended. And then you become more fearless, right? And I don't know if fear ever really truly leaves, but you also have the tools to overcome it so it doesn't paralyze you.
That's right. Absolutely.
Todd, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
All right, folks, that does it for this episode of the Class E Podcast. I'm your host, Mary Sturgill. Remember, this podcast is brought to you through a partnership between the Hill Institute for Innovation and Entrepreneurship and the Communication Studies Department here at Furman University. Remember, you can catch the podcast 2 places now, wherever you listen to your podcast, but now we have a brand new YouTube channel. You can watch this conversation on YouTube. Just look for the Class E Podcast for there. And, of course, this episode is produced by Communication Studies students Emma Kerr and Eliza Polich. Thank you for tuning in, everyone. I'm Mary Sturgill. Until next time, dream big, everybody.